The emergency beacon screamed across the void, a desperate electronic wail that cut through the cosmic silence like a blade. Captain Sarah Chen felt her heart sink as the translation matrix decoded the alien distress signal. The words appeared on her console in stark, clinical text, but she could hear the raw terror bleeding through every syllable. Sanctuary vessel Gentle Dawn under attack. Raiders have breached our hull. They're killing the younglings. Please, anyone who can hear this, we cannot fight. We are a peaceful people, our cubs. Our cubs are dying. Sarah's knuckles went white as she gripped the armrests of her command chair. Around her, the bridge of the human cruiser Defiant buzzed with controlled tension. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, looked up from his console with grim determination etched across his face. Captain, we're picking up massive energy signatures. Looks like a full raider fleet, at least 12 ships. They've got the sanctuary vessel completely surrounded. The view screen flickered to life, showing the horror unfolding in the asteroid belt of the Kepler 442 system. The Gentle Dawn was a thing of beauty even in its death throes. A massive bioship grown rather than built, its organic hull pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that Sarah recognized as distress markers. Swarming around it like metallic parasites were the angular, predatory forms of Bloodfang raiders. Sarah had encountered the Cathara before. They were a gentle species, herbivorous and pacifist by nature. Their entire society was built around nurturing and protecting their young, whom they called cubs even though they resembled nothing so much as luminescent butterflies the size of house cats. The Cathara had never developed weapons, never needed them. They survived through cooperation, diplomacy, and when necessary, flight. But there was nowhere to run in the asteroid belt. "Sir," her communications officer called out, voice tight with emotion. "I'm picking up internal transmissions from the sanctuary ship. The raiders aren't just looting, they're hunting. They're systematically executing the adult Cathara and they're taking the cubs." Sarah's jaw clenched. She knew what that meant. Cathara cubs were prized in certain black market circles, not as slaves or food, but as living decorations. Their bioluminescent patterns could be artificially stimulated to create beautiful, ever-changing light shows. The cubs would be kept in tiny cages, tortured into producing their defensive light displays for the entertainment of wealthy collectors. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "we're outnumbered 4-1. The Defiant is tough, but those are full battle cruisers. If we engage, we might not make it out." Sarah stared at the tactical display. He was right. The smart play was to wait, gather intelligence, maybe follow the raiders back to their base and call in a full fleet response. It was the sensible thing to do. Another transmission crackled through the speakers, this one weaker, more desperate. "My cubs, please, they're just bobbies. They don't understand what's happening. Someone help us, please." Sarah thought of her own daughter, safe back on Earth, probably complaining about homework or boys or whatever 17-year-old problem seemed earth-shattering this week. She thought of the terror in that alien mother's voice, the universal language of a parent watching their children suffer. "Helm set intercept course, maximum burn." Captain, Rodriguez started. "I said maximum burn." Sarah's voice cut through the bridge like ice. "And Rodriguez, warm up all weapon systems. If those bastards want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." The Defiant surged forward, her fusion engines painting a brief star against the darkness. They had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached weapons range. 10 minutes to figure out how one human ship was going to take on an entire raider fleet and somehow save the innocents caught in between. Sarah pulled up the ship's manifest on her personal display. 347 crew members, most of them barely out of the academy. Kids themselves, really, full of dreams about exploring the galaxy and making humanity proud among the stars. She was about to ask them to die for aliens they'd never met, for principles that might not matter to anyone but her. "Attention, crew of the Defiant, she said, activating the shipwide comm. "In approximately 8 minutes, we will engage a superior enemy force. They are currently in the process of slaughtering civilians, families, children. We cannot stand by and watch. I won't lie to you about the odds. We may not all make it home. But if we do nothing, if we turn away, then we're not the people I thought we were. We're not the species that deserves to walk among the stars." She paused, watching the tactical display as the distance to the raider fleet steadily decreased. "Today, we show the galaxy what humans do when innocents are threatened. Today, we show them that mercy isn't weakness, it's strength. All hands prepare for battle." The response was immediate. Across the ship, systems powered up with deadly efficiency. The crew moved with practiced precision, their training taking over even as their hearts hammered with fear and determination. These weren't hardened veterans, most of them had never seen real combat, but they were human and that meant something. "Captain," the communications officer called out. "The raiders are hailing us, they want to talk." "Put them through." The main screen flickered, showing the scarred, predatory face of what was obviously a Bloodfang captain. His species looked like someone had crossed a shark with a praying mantis and given the result a really bad attitude. Razor-sharp teeth filled his gash of a mouth, and his forearms ended in claws that could slice through steel. "Human vessel," the raider captain snarled. "You are interfering in a lawful salvage operation. Turn away or be destroyed." Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Funny thing about salvage operations, they usually involve empty ships. That's not what I'm seeing here. The alien's laugh was like grinding metal. "The Cathara are weak. They exist only to serve the strong. Their cubs will bring a fine price in the hegemony markets. Turn away, little human, before we add your ship to our collection." "Counteroffer," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "Release the civilians and surrender. I'll make sure you get a fair trial instead of spacing you out the nearest airlock." The raider captain's expression shifted to one of genuine amusement. "You would die for these prey animals. They are nothing to you, not even your own species." Sarah leaned forward in her chair, her eyes never leaving the alien's face. "That's where you're wrong. They're exactly like my species. Their parents trying to protect their children, and where I come from, that's all that matters." The connection cut. Almost immediately, 4 of the raider ships broke off from the sanctuary vessel and began accelerating toward the defiant Asterisk. Sarah watched them come, her mind already calculating vectors and probabilities. The math wasn't encouraging. "Sir," Rodriguez said, "enemy ships are powering weapons, plasma cannons and kinetic accelerators. They'll be in range in 3 minutes." Sarah nodded. "Engine room, I need everything you can give me. Tactical, prepare for evasive maneuvers, and someone get me a firing solution on their lead ship." The next few minutes passed in tense silence. Sarah could feel the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders, the knowledge that every decision she made could mean life or death for her crew. But underneath that pressure was something else, a cold, burning anger at the thought of those cubs being tortured for someone's entertainment. "Enemy ships opening fire," Rodriguez announced. The view screen lit up as streams of plasma and kinetic projectiles reached out toward them. The Defiant twisted away from the incoming fire like a dancer, her hull groaning under the stress of high-G maneuvers. Most of the shots missed, but one plasma bolt clipped their starboard shields, sending cascades of energy crackling across the deflector grid. "Shields at 87%, Rodriguez reported. "We're in range, firing." The Defiant's main guns spoke with the voice of controlled fusion, sending twin beams of coherent energy lancing out toward the nearest raider ship. The alien vessel tried to evade, but human weapon systems had always been designed with one principle in mind: overwhelming firepower applied with surgical precision. The beams punched through the raider's shields like they weren't there and carved deep gouges in its hull. Atmosphere and debris vented into space as the ship's structural integrity began to fail, but it wasn't enough to stop them. "Enemy ship is still combat capable," Rodriguez said, "but we hurt them bad." Sarah nodded grimly. "Good, let's hurt them all, target the next ship." The battle began in earnest. The Defiant danced through space, her human crew pushing the ship beyond her design limits. They traded shots with the raiders, giving better than they got but taking damage with each exchange. The bridge filled with the acrid smell of burning circuits and the constant chatter of damage reports. But even as they fought, Sarah kept one eye on the sanctuary vessel. The remaining raider ships were still there, still loading terrified Cathara cubs into their cargo holds. Every minute they spent in combat was another minute of suffering for the innocents they'd come to save. That's when she noticed something on the tactical display that made her blood run cold. The sanctuary vessel's bioluminescent patterns were shifting, growing brighter. At first, she thought it might be some kind of distress signal, but then her communications officer looked up with wide eyes. "Captain," he said, voice shaking slightly, "I'm picking up a transmission from the sanctuary vessel. It's not a distress call anymore. They're saying goodbye. They're going to self-destruct." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The Cathara were planning to kill themselves rather than let their cubs be taken. It was the only weapon they had, denying the raiders their prize, even if it meant dying in the process. "How long?" she asked quietly. "Bioship overload takes time to build up, maybe 20 minutes, but Captain, there are still Cathara alive on that ship, cubs and adults both." Sarah stared at the display, her mind racing. 20 minutes to somehow fight off an entire raider fleet and rescue the survivors. 20 minutes to do the impossible. She looked around at her crew, young faces filled with determination and trust, waiting for her to somehow pull off a miracle. Rodriguez caught her eye and nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without words. They were all thinking the same thing. 20 minutes wasn't enough time, but it was all they had. "All right, people," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "Change of plans. We're not just fighting these bastards anymore. We're going to board that sanctuary vessel and get those civilians out. Prep the shuttle bay and break out the EVA suits. This just became a rescue mission." The crew responded with grim efficiency, even as the ship shuddered under another barrage of enemy fire. Sarah gripped her command chair and watched the tactical display, calculating odds and possibilities. The math still wasn't good, but mathematics had never been humanity's strongest suit anyway. What they were good at was refusing to give up. What they were good at was looking at impossible odds and spitting in fate's eye. The raiders were about to learn that lesson the hard way. The shuttle bay of the Asterisk Defiant had been transformed into organized chaos. Marines in powered armor checked their weapons while engineers loaded cutting tools and medical supplies. The air thrummed with tension and the low hum of charging energy cells. Sarah stood at the center of it all, her own combat suit sealed and ready, feeling the weight of command like a physical thing pressing against her shoulders. "Captain," Sergeant Major Williams approached, his scarred face grim behind his helmet's visor. 20 Marines ready for boarding action. We've got plasma cutters, emergency medical gear, and enough firepower to punch through whatever the raiders have waiting for us." Sarah nodded, then activated her helmet's display to show the tactical situation. The sanctuary vessel loomed before them, a massive organic shape that pulsed with increasingly frantic bioluminescent patterns. The ship was dying, its biological systems pushed beyond their limits as the Cathara prepared for their final act of defiance. "Listen up," Sarah's voice carried across the shuttle bay through the comm system. "We've got approximately 15 minutes before that bioship goes critical. The raiders have pulled most of their forces back to a safe distance, but they've left boarding parties inside to secure their prize. We're going to have to fight our way through them and evacuate as many survivors as possible." She paused, looking at the faces around her. Young men and women who had signed up to explore the galaxy, now preparing to risk their lives for people they'd never met. The pride she felt was almost overwhelming. "I won't lie to you, this is going to be ugly. Cathara bioships aren't designed for human physiology. The corridors will be tight, the atmosphere will be wrong, and the raiders will fight like cornered animals. But remember why we're here. Remember those cubs." The loading doors sealed with a hiss of pressurizing atmosphere. Through the viewports, Sarah could see the battle still raging outside. The Defiant continued her deadly dance with the raider ships, her remaining gun turrets spitting fire while her shields flickered under constant bombardment. Lieutenant Rodriguez and the bridge crew were buying them time with their lives, keeping the enemy focused on the human cruiser rather than the small shuttles now launching toward the sanctuary vessel. The ride to the bioship was a nightmare of acceleration and evasive maneuvers. Their pilot, a young ensign named Patterson, threw the shuttle through impossible vectors to avoid the streams of weapons fire crossing the space between the two vessels. Sarah watched through the tactical display as plasma bolts reached out for them like grasping fingers, missing by meters that might as well have been miles. "Approaching the sanctuary vessel," Patterson called back. "I'm reading massive bioelectrical activity throughout the ship's hull. Whatever the Cathara are doing to overload their systems, it's building fast." Through the viewports, Sarah could see the alien ship up close for the first time. The hull was smooth and organic, like the skin of some massive sea creature. Veins of light pulsed beneath the surface in patterns that spoke of pain and desperation. Here and there, ugly tears in the hull showed where the raiders had forced their way inside with crude cutting tools. "There," Sergeant Major Williams pointed to one of the larger breaches. "That's our way in." Patterson brought the shuttle in close, his hands dancing across the controls as he matched velocity with the slowly tumbling bioship. The docking was rough, the magnetic clamps barely finding purchase on the alien hull, but it held. Immediately, the Marines began cutting through the airlock that separated them from the interior of the sanctuary vessel. The first thing that hit Sarah as they breached the hull was the smell. The Cathara atmosphere was rich with organic compounds that made her nose wrinkle even through her suit's filters. The air itself seemed to glow faintly, filled with luminescent particles that the aliens used for communication. The corridors of the bioship were unlike anything in human design. They curved and branched like blood vessels, their walls soft and yielding underfoot. Bioluminescent strips provided gentle lighting that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's dying heartbeat. Everything was scaled for the Cathara, beings roughly half the height of humans, but with a wingspan that required the corridors to be wide and tall. "Contact front," Williams whispered through the comm, his voice tight with controlled aggression. Ahead of them, a group of Bloodfang raiders was herding a cluster of Cathara cubs down the corridor. The young aliens moved with the uncertain flutter of butterfly wings, their own bioluminescent patterns flashing in terror. The raiders drove them forward with electric prods, laughing at the cubs' distress. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She'd seen a lot of things in her years of military service, but watching adult predators terrorize children, any children, alien or not, triggered something primal in her human psychology. "Take them," she ordered. The Marines moved with lethal efficiency. Plasma rifles spoke with sharp, controlled bursts. The raiders, caught completely off guard by the sudden human assault, barely had time to raise their weapons before they were cut down. The corridor filled with the acrid smell of burned alien flesh. The Cathara cubs huddled together in terror, their patterns flashing between the bright yellows of fear and the deep purples of confusion. Sarah approached them slowly, her hands visible and empty, speaking in the calm, soothing tones she'd once used with her own daughter after nightmares. "It's okay," she said, even though she knew they couldn't understand the words. "We're here to help. We're going to get you out of here." One of the cubs, braver than the others, fluttered closer. Its pattern shifted to questioning blues and greens. Sarah activated her suit's translation matrix, hoping the ship's computer could make sense of the Cathara light language. "Strange tall ones," the translation came through as electronic pulses. "Not Deathbringers." "No," Sarah said, relief flooding through her as the translation system worked. "We are friends. We came to help. Where are your parents?" The cub's pattern shifted to deep, pulsing red, the color of grief. Deathbringers took parent voices to the ship heart, making silence forever. Sarah's blood ran cold. The raiders were executing the adult Cathara in the ship's central chamber. "How many cubs are left? How many parent voices?" "Many, many," the cub replied. "Ship heart holds all, but warm death comes soon. Ship mother makes bright tending to stop Deathbringers." 15 minutes had become 12. Sarah did rapid mental calculations. The ship's central chamber would be heavily defended, probably with the remainder of the raider boarding party. They'd have to fight their way through, secure the survivors, and somehow get everyone back to the shuttles before the bioship's overload reached critical mass. "Williams, take Alpha Team and escort these cubs back to the shuttles. Beta Team is with me. We're heading for the ship's heart." The sergeant major's expression was clearly visible through his visor. "Captain, you should go with the cubs. Let us handle the assault." Sarah shook her head. "Those are my people dying up there. I'm not abandoning them to save myself." The truth was more complex than that, and she knew Williams understood it. This wasn't about heroics or glory. It was about the simple fact that as the ranking officer, she couldn't ask her people to do something she wasn't willing to do herself. Leadership meant being willing to pay the same price you asked of others. The journey to the ship's heart was a running battle through the organic corridors of the sanctuary vessel. The raiders had established defensive positions at key choke points, forcing the humans to fight for every meter of ground. The Marines moved with grim efficiency, their weapons cutting through alien armor and flesh with equal ease. But for every raider they killed, precious seconds ticked away. Sarah could feel the ship around them beginning to convulse as its biological systems approached critical overload. The bioluminescent strips flickered faster now, like a heartbeat approaching cardiac arrest. They reached the ship's central chamber to find a scene from humanity's worst nightmares. The space was vast and cathedral-like, its organic walls rising into darkness above. In the center, a cluster of adult Cathara were bound with energy restraints, their patterns dim with despair. Around them, a full squad of Bloodfang raiders waited with weapons ready. And standing over the prisoners, a figure that made Sarah's blood freeze in her veins. The raider captain from the viewscreen was here in person, his four arms spread wide in a gesture of mock welcome. In one clawed hand, he held a small Cathara cub by its wing. The young alien's pattern flashed in agony with each squeeze of those razor-sharp talons. "The hero arrives," the captain snarled, his translator rendering his words in clipped, mechanical tones. "Come to save the prey animals, little human. You are too late. Watch as I demonstrate the futility of mercy." His grip tightened, and the cub's agonized cry cut through the air like a blade. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest, not break, but transform into something harder and colder than steel. "Let the cub go," she said, her voice carrying the authority of absolute command. "This is between you and me." The raider captain laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Between us? You are nothing, human. Your ship burns in space, your crew feeds the void. Soon this vessel will destroy itself, and I will take my prizes to market. The only choice you have is how you wish to die." Sarah looked around the chamber, calculating odds and distances. 8 raiders, including their captain. 12 Marines, including herself. The adult Cathara bound in the center, and who knew how many cubs hidden in the shadows. The ship's overload building toward critical mass. The math was actually in their favor for once, but mathematics didn't account for the innocent lives caught in the crossfire. "You're right about one thing," Sarah said, slowly raising her plasma rifle. "This is going to end badly for someone, but you've made a mistake that's going to cost you everything." The captain's eyes narrowed. "And what mistake is that, human?" Sarah's smile was cold as the space between stars. "You hurt a child in front of a human. We tend to take that personally." The battle that followed was brief, but vicious. Sarah's Marines had the advantage of superior training and equipment, but the raiders fought with the desperation of cornered predators. The chamber filled with the flash of energy weapons and the screams of the dying. Sarah herself went straight for the captain, her rifle spitting controlled bursts as she closed the distance between them. The alien warrior was fast, his 4 arms allowing him to wield multiple weapons at once, but humans had evolved to be persistence hunters. What they lacked in raw speed, they made up for in relentless determination. The captain made the mistake of using the injured cub as a shield. It was a tactic that might have worked against another predator species, but humans had a peculiar psychological quirk. Threatening their young, or anyone's young, didn't make them back down. It made them angry. And angry humans were among the most dangerous things in the known galaxy. Sarah's shot took the captain's weapon arm off at the shoulder. Her second shot punched through his chest armor. As he fell, still clutching the wounded cub, she was already moving, catching the young alien before it could hit the ground. The cub's pattern was weak, its light fatting as alien blood seeped from wounds inflicted by the captain's claws. Sarah cradled it gently, her trained medic instincts taking over as she applied emergency treatment. "Stay with me," she whispered, even though she knew the universal translator couldn't convey the emotional weight of her words. "You're going to be okay, I promise." Around them, the battle was winding down. The Marines had secured the chamber, freeing the adult Cathara from their restraints. But the ship's overload was accelerating, the walls themselves beginning to pulse with dangerous energy levels. Captain Williams called out, "We need to move, now." Sarah looked around the chamber, counting heads. 23 adult Cathara plus the wounded cub in her arms. Too many to evacuate in one trip, and they didn't have time for multiple runs. That's when one of the adult Cathara approached her, its pattern shifting to complex spirals that the translator struggled to parse. "Ship Mother," it finally managed. "Ship Mother shows gratitude, Ship Mother offers gift." The alien moved to what Sarah had taken for a decorative wall panel, but which now began to iris open like a massive eye. Beyond it, she could see the stars, and more importantly, a cluster of small biopods drifting in space near the sanctuary vessel. "Escape seeds," the Cathara explained. "For the cubs, Ship Mother prepared for the bright ending. The young ones can reach the safe distance." Sarah felt a wave of relief so intense it was almost physical. The Cathara had planned for this possibility, creating biological escape pods for their young. But as she watched the pods drift past the opening, she realized there was still a problem. The pods were designed for Cathara physiology. There was no way her Marines could fit inside them, and no way to modify them in the few minutes they had left. She looked around at her people, young faces behind helmet visors, trusting her to somehow get them all home safe. The weight of command had never felt heavier. That's when the wounded cub in her arms began to glow brighter, its pattern shifting to something she'd never seen before. The translation came through as pure emotion rather than words, gratitude, determination, and something that felt remarkably like courage. The other Cathara saw it too, their own patterns beginning to shift and pulse in harmony. They were planning something, Sarah realized, something that might just save them all. The sanctuary vessel shuddered around them as its biological systems approached critical overload. Sarah could feel the ship dying beneath her feet, its organic corridors convulsing like the muscles of a wounded animal. Through her suit's sensors, she detected massive energy buildups throughout the bioship's neural network. They had perhaps 5 minutes before the vessel tore itself apart in a final act of defiance against its tormentors. The Cathara around her had begun moving with urgent purpose, their bioluminescent patterns shifting into complex configurations that her translator couldn't fully parse. The wounded cub in her arms grew brighter despite its injuries, adding its voice to what was becoming a chorus of living light. "Ship Mother listens," the lead Cathara explained, its pattern now a steady blue-white pulse. "Ship Mother understands. The warm ones who fight for cubs, Ship Mother makes new way." Sarah felt the deck plates beneath her feet begin to shift and flow like liquid. The organic material was reshaping itself, responding to the collective will of the Cathara. Where moments before there had been solid hull, new openings began to iris open. But these weren't the small escape pods she'd seen before. "What are they doing?" Williams asked, his voice tight with nervous tension. Before Sarah could answer, the adult Cathara began moving toward the new openings. But instead of entering them, they pressed their hands against the organic controls, their patterns pulsing in unison. The ship responded to their touch, growing larger pods, reshaping the life support systems, modifying the escape vehicles to accommodate human physiology. "They're giving up their own escape pods," Sarah realized with growing awe. "They're modifying them for us." One of the adult Cathara approached her, its pattern now a complex weave of silver and gold that the translator rendered as deep gratitude mixed with fierce determination. "The starfighters saved the cubs. Ship Mother owes life debt. The warm ones must live to fight again." Sarah shook her head, even as she felt her throat tighten with emotion. "We can't leave you behind. There has to be another way." The alien's pattern shifted to something that felt like a gentle smile. "Ship Mother has carried us across the star rivers for many cycles. Now Ship Mother carries us into the bright ending. It is the way of our people, the old sacrifice for the young, the strong sacrifice for the weak. You have shown us that this way is not ours alone." Around them, more Cathara were making the same choice. They moved among the cubs, gently herding them toward the modified escape pods while keeping the deteriorating ones for themselves. Their patterns spoke of love, of sacrifice, of a peace that transcended species boundaries. Sarah felt tears running down her face inside her helmet. She'd seen courage before, had served alongside heroes who'd given their lives for their brothers and sisters in arms. But this was different. These beings were choosing to die not for their own kind, but to save the humans who had risked everything to help them. "No," she said firmly, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "Nobody else dies today, not if I have anything to say about it." She activated her suit's emergency beacon, broadcasting on all frequencies. "Defiant, this is the captain. I need immediate extraction for 20-plus survivors. Maximum emergency authority." Rodriguez's voice crackled back through the static of battle. "Captain, we're still engaged with enemy forces. The shuttle bay is taking heavy fire. I'm not sure we can." "Lieutenant," Sarah cut him off, "I'm giving you a direct order. Break off engagement and prepare for emergency docking. Use the ship's mast to shield the extraction." There was a pause. Around Sarah, the sanctuary vessel continued its death spiral, its bioluminescent veins now pulsing with dangerous red light. The Cathara waited patiently, their patterns resigned but peaceful. "Acknowledged, Captain. Defiant is moving to assist. But Sarah—" Rodriguez's voice dropped to something more personal than rank and protocol allowed. Even if we get you all out, the ship won't survive another major engagement. We're running on backup power and prayers." Sarah looked around at the aliens surrounding her, cubs and adults alike, all depending on her to somehow find a miracle in the next few minutes. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. The Defiant Asterisk was dying, the sanctuary vessel was beyond saving, and the raider fleet was still out there. But humans had never been particularly good at accepting the mathematics of impossible situations. "Williams," she called to her sergeant major, "how much demolition gear did we bring?" The scarred Marine's face split into a savage grin as he understood what she was thinking. "Enough to ruin someone's day, Captain. You thinking what I think you're thinking." Sarah nodded grimly. "The raiders want this ship intact for salvage rights. What if we made sure there was nothing left to salvage?" The plan that formed in her mind was desperate, insane, and probably suicidal. But it was also the kind of audacious gambit that humans specialized in, the sort of plan that other species considered impossible right up until the moment humans actually pulled it off. "All right, people, listen up," she announced to both her Marines and the Cathara through the translation system. "We're going to accelerate this ship's overload sequence. Instead of a slow burn that gives the raiders time to escape, we're going to turn this thing into the biggest fusion bomb this side of the galactic core." Williams was already moving, pulling demolition charges from his pack. "Where do you want these, Captain?" Sarah activated her suit's tactical display, overlaying the ship's biological structure with targeting data. "The neural clusters. If we can overload the bioship's nervous system all at once, the cascade effect should propagate through the entire vessel in seconds instead of minutes." Around them, the Cathara began pulsing with new patterns, complex spirals of light that her translator couldn't fully parse, but which felt like urgent communication. Finally, the lead alien approached her, its pattern now a swirling mix of amazement and something that might have been admiration. "Ship Mother speaks," it said through the electronic translator. "Ship Mother says the starfighter thinks like Cathara, sacrifice one to save many. Ship Mother will help. Ship Mother will sing the bright-ending song." What followed was a desperate race against time and biology. Sarah's Marines placed their charges at key neural junctions throughout the ship while the Cathara worked to coordinate the vessel's final sacrifice. The bioship responded to their touch like a living thing, which, Sarah realized, it essentially was. The ship wasn't just carrying the Cathara. It was one of them, a massive organism that had spent its life protecting its smaller cousins. "Charges set," Williams reported. "Neural cascade should propagate through the entire vessel in under 30 seconds once we trigger it." Through her suit's external speakers, Sarah could hear the sound of the Defiance Asterisk engines as the human cruiser moved into position. Rodriguez was bringing the ship in close, dangerously close, using its bulk to shield the extraction zone from raider weapons fire. It was a maneuver that would leave the Defiant Asterisk vulnerable, but it was their only chance. "All survivors to the modified escape pods," Sarah ordered. "Marines, you're escorting the cubs. I'll take the detonator." Williams started to protest, but Sarah cut him off with a look. "That's an order, Sergeant Major. Get our people out of here." The next few minutes were chaos. Marines herded terrified cubs into the organic escape pods while the adult Cathara made final preparations for their ship's destruction. Sarah watched them work, marveling at their calm in the face of certain death. They moved with the serenity of people who had made peace with their choices. "Last pod is loaded," Williams called out. "Captain, we need to go now." Sarah looked around the dying ship one last time. The Cathara who were staying behind had arranged themselves in the center of the chamber, their patterns now synchronized into a single, beautiful spiral of light. They were singing, not with voices, but with their entire beings, their bioluminescence creating a farewell song that transcended species barriers. "Go," Sarah told her people. "Get to the Defiant Asterisk. I'll be right behind you." She waited until the last escape pod had launched, then activated the detonator. The charges went off with a series of sharp cracks that she felt through the ship's hull. Immediately, the sanctuary vessel began convulsing as its neural network overloaded in a cascading chain reaction. Sarah ran for the last pod, her feet pounding against deck plates that were already beginning to buckle and flow. Behind her, the bioluminescent song of the dying Cathara grew brighter and more intense, their final performance a masterpiece of beauty and sacrifice. She dove into the escape pod just as the ship's main neural cluster exploded in a cascade of brilliant light. The pod's organic walls sealed around her, and she felt the sudden sensation of acceleration as the vessel's biological rockets fired. Through the pod's transparent sections, she watched the sanctuary vessel tear itself apart. What had been a graceful bioship became an expanding sphere of fusion fire, the Cathara's final gift to the galaxy, a funeral pyre bright enough to be seen across the system. The explosion caught 3 of the raider ships in its outer edge, their hulls buckling under the massive energy release. The remaining raiders, suddenly faced with the loss of their prize and a significant portion of their fleet, decided that discretion was the better part of valor. They began accelerating away from the system, their desire for profit overcome by their survival instincts. Sarah's escape pod docked with the Defiant with a gentle bump that felt like coming home. As the airlock cycled, she found herself face to face with Rodriguez, his expression a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Status report," she said, slipping back into command mode even as she stripped off her helmet. "We're hurt, but we're alive," Rodriguez replied. "The raider fleet is in full retreat, and Captain," he paused, his voice softening, "the Cathara cubs are safe, all of them. Medical says they'll make full recoveries." Sarah nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Around them, the ship bustled with activity as the crew dealt with damage control and tended to their unexpected passengers. The Defiant would need major repairs before she was ready for another fight, but she'd served her purpose. Through the viewport, the expanding cloud of plasma and debris that had once been the sanctuary vessel continued to glow against the stars. Somewhere in that beautiful, terrible light, the adult Cathara had found their peace. They'd chosen to die as they had lived, protecting the innocent and showing the galaxy that courage wasn't about being the strongest or the most heavily armed. It was about being willing to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. As Sarah watched the light fade, she felt a small hand touch her arm. She looked down to see one of the Cathara cubs, its pattern now a gentle, grateful blue. The translation came through as pure emotion, thankfulness, trust, and something that transcended language entirely. "You're welcome," Sarah whispered, kneeling down to the cub's level. "You're safe now, I promise." The cub's pattern shifted to curious greens and yellows. "Starfighter," the translator rendered its communication. "Why did you risk the bright tending for us? We are not your nestkin." Sarah smiled, thinking of her daughter back on Earth, of the universal bond that connected all parents across the galaxy. "Because," she said softly, "someone has to stand up for the cubs, no matter whose cubs they are." The young alien's pattern brightened with understanding, and Sarah knew that message would be carried back to the Cathara homeworld. The galaxy would learn that humanity could be trusted, that when children were in danger, humans would answer the call. It was a lesson the raiders had learned too, though theirs had been written in fire and loss. Word would spread through the black market networks. Humans didn't just defend their own young. They defended all young, and anyone who threatened children in human space had better be prepared for the consequences. But for now, Sarah simply held the grateful cub and watched the stars, knowing that somewhere among them there were other ships, other children who might need someone to stand up for them when the darkness came calling. And when that time came, humanity would be ready. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler 442, Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation lounge of Earth Station Prime, watching the construction crews put the finishing touches on the newest addition to the human fleet. The ship taking shape in the orbital yards was unlike anything humanity had built before, a fusion of human engineering and Cathara biotechnology that represented something entirely new in galactic civilization. "The Asterisk Guardian Asterisk," Admiral Morrison said, joining Sarah at the viewport. "First of the Sanctuary-class vessels, bioorganic hull with human weapon systems and shielding technology. The Cathara engineers say it'll be able to carry 10,000 refugees while still maintaining full combat capability." Sarah nodded, watching as work crews guided living hull segments into place. The sight still amazed her, watching a ship grow rather than being built. The Cathara had shared their bioship technology freely, asking for nothing in return except humanity's promise to protect other species that couldn't protect themselves. "Any word from the Exploration Council?" Sarah asked. Morrison's expression darkened slightly. "That's actually why I wanted to speak with you. The Council has been..." vocal about our new policies. Ambassador Tival in particular seems to think we're overextending ourselves. Sarah turned away from the viewport to face her superior officer. The Admiral was a good woman, but the stress of the past few months showed in the lines around her eyes. The aftermath of Kepler 442 had created ripples throughout known space, forcing humanity into a role they'd never asked for but couldn't seem to avoid. "What's the current situation?" Sarah asked. Morrison activated a holographic display that showed the local galactic sector. Red markers indicated conflict zones, while green showed areas under various forms of protection. There were far too many red markers for Sarah's comfort. 17 separate incidents in the past month alone, Morrison explained. Raiders, slavers, territorial disputes involving civilian populations. Every time, the affected species send distress calls specifically requesting human intervention. We're becoming the galaxy's emergency response service. Sarah studied the display thoughtfully. Since word had spread about humanity's actions at Kepler 442, they'd found themselves inundated with pleas for help from species across known space. What had started as one ship's moral choice had somehow become an unofficial policy of intervention wherever innocents were threatened. And the Council objects to this. The hegemony races think we're destabilizing existing power structures, Morrison replied. The Tikari Empire is particularly upset about our interference in their internal affairs. Apparently, they consider slave raids to be a legitimate form of commerce. The Exploration Council wants us to step back, focus on human interests only. Sarah felt a familiar coldness settle in her chest. She'd read the reports from the so-called internal affairs that the Tikari considered legitimate. Entire species reduced to slavery, their children sold in markets like livestock. The memories of those terrified Cathara cubs made her decision easy. "What does Fleet Command say?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Fleet Command says that Captain Sarah Chen and her crew opened this particular box, so Captain Sarah Chen gets to decide how we handle what comes out of it. Congratulations, you're now in charge of the new Humanitarian Response Division." The weight of that responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a familiar burden. Around them, the observation lounge continued to hum with quiet conversation from other officers, but she felt suddenly isolated by the magnitude of what was being asked of her. "How many ships?" she asked quietly. 12 to start with, including the Defiant once repairs are complete, a mix of cruisers, destroyers, and the new Sanctuary-class vessels. Hand-picked crews, all volunteers. Morrison paused. "Sarah, I need you to understand what you're taking on. This isn't going to be like normal fleet operations. You'll be operating in disputed space, often without backup, facing enemies who see you as an existential threat to their way of life." Sarah thought about the cubs currently living in the biohabitat they'd constructed on Luna, slowly recovering from their trauma under the care of human xenobiologists and the few adult Cathara who had survived in other ships. She thought about the messages that came in daily, desperate pleas for help from species who had nowhere else to turn. "The crew of the Defiant Asterisk," she said finally. "Are they staying with the program?" "Every last one of them. Rodriguez has been promoted to commander and will be your second in command. Williams made chief and is running the new Marine Rapid Response teams. Even Patterson requested transfer to the program." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "They believe in what you started, Sarah. They want to see it through." Through the viewport, Sarah watched as a section of living hull pulsed with gentle bioluminescence, the ship's way of communicating contentment with its growth process. The Cathara had taught them that their bioships were truly alive, possessed of a simple but genuine intelligence that took joy in protecting those who sheltered within their hulls. "There's something else," Morrison continued. "Intelligence reports suggest the various criminal syndicates are organizing a response. The Bloodfang Raiders have put a bounty on your head that's apparently large enough to buy a small moon. They're calling you the Child Stealer." Sarah laughed, surprising herself with the genuine humor she felt. "Child Stealer? I suppose there are worse things to be called." "They're taking this seriously, Sarah. Our sources suggest they're planning something big, a coordinated strike designed to send a message that human interference won't be tolerated." Sarah nodded slowly. She'd expected something like this. When you disrupted established power structures, those structures tended to push back. The question was whether humanity was ready for what was coming. When does the Asterisk Guardian reach operational status? She asked. 2 weeks, assuming the biointegration goes according to plan. The other ships in your division are already being retrofitted with Cathara sensor technology and medical facilities designed for multi-species rescue operations. Sarah made her decision. I want to meet with the crews before we deploy, all of them together. They need to understand what they're signing up for. 1 week later, Sarah stood before an assembly of nearly 3,000 officers and crew members in the main hangar bay of Earth Station Prime. Representatives from every ship in the Humanitarian Response Division were present, their faces reflecting a mixture of anticipation and nervous determination. You all know why you're here, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the hangar's acoustic systems. 3 months ago, the crew of the Asterisk Defiant made a choice. We could have followed regulations, called for backup, waited for proper authorization. Instead, we chose to act when innocent lives were at stake. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. Young and old, experienced veterans and fresh academy graduates, they all shared a common thread. They'd volunteered for duty that would take them far from home into danger for people they'd never met. The galaxy has taken notice of that choice. Every day, we receive calls for help from species that have nowhere else to turn. Pirates, slavers, genocidal regimes, they all count on the fact that the peaceful races of the galaxy can't fight back. They count on the fact that the stronger species don't care enough to get involved. The hangar was completely silent now, 3,000 people hanging on every word. They're about to learn that they counted wrong. Humanity cares. We care about the Cathara cubs being sold in black markets. We care about the Velter refugees fleeing planetary bombardment. We care about the mining colonies being raided for slave labor. We care because that's who we are. Sarah activated a holographic display that showed the current galactic situation. All those red markers indicating ongoing conflicts and humanitarian crises. What we're undertaking isn't going to be easy. We'll be outnumbered, outgunned, and operating in hostile territory. The enemy will have local knowledge and the advantage of choosing when and where to fight. Some of you may not come home. She let that sink in for a moment, watching faces harden with resolve rather than fear. But understand this, what we do out there matters. Every child we save, every family we reunite, every tyrant we stop, it all adds up. We're not just representing humanity, we're representing the idea that the strong have a responsibility to protect the weak. That civilization means something more than just technology and firepower. Commander Rodriguez stepped forward from the crowd. Captain, what happens when we run into something bigger than we can handle? What happens when we're the ones calling for help? It was a good question, one that had been weighing on Sarah's mind for weeks. The mathematics of intervention were unforgiving. Eventually, they would encounter a situation that their small fleet couldn't handle. Then we do what humans have always done, Sarah replied. We adapt, we find allies among the species we've helped, we build coalitions of the willing, and if that's not enough, she smiled grimly, then we make sure our sacrifice means something. We make sure the galaxy remembers that someone stood up. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out, "What about fleet regulations, chain of command?" Sarah had been expecting this question too. The Humanitarian Response Division existed in a legal gray area, technically under Fleet Command authority, but operating with unprecedented autonomy. Fleet Command has given us broad, discretionary authority, she answered. But understand that what we're really operating under is a higher authority, the simple moral principle that those who can help must help. When you see a child in danger, you don't check regulations, you act. Chief Williams stepped forward, his scarred face split by a familiar grin. Captain, speaking for the Marines, we're ready to go wherever you point us. Just promise us one thing. When we find the bastards who are hurting kids, we get to express our displeasure in the traditional manner. Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking some of the tension. Sarah felt a wave of affection for these people, her people, who were willing to follow her into the unknown. Chief Williams, I can guarantee you'll have plenty of opportunities to express your displeasure. But remember, we're not conquerors, we're protectors. We use exactly as much force as necessary to stop the bad guys and save the good guys. No more, no less. She looked around the hangar one last time, meeting as many eyes as she could. In 1 week, we deploy to the Outer Rim. Intelligence suggests the Bloodfang raiders are planning a major operation against several civilian targets. We're going to stop them. But more than that, we're going to send a message that will echo across the galaxy. Humanity stands with the innocent. Humanity protects those who cannot protect themselves. And anyone who threatens children, any children anywhere, will answer to us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 3,000 voices raised in a cheer that echoed off the hangar walls. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes as she watched these brave men and women prepare to risk everything for strangers. As the assembly broke up, Rodriguez approached her with a thoughtful expression. "Sarah," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder if we're biting off more than we can chew? The galaxy's a big place, and we're just one small fleet." Sarah looked out through the hangar's viewports at the stars beyond. Millions of suns, billions of worlds, countless species struggling to survive in an often hostile universe. "Maybe," she admitted, "but you know what I've learned? It doesn't matter how big the problem is, it matters that someone tries to solve it, and if enough someones try, if enough people stand up," she smiled. "Well, maybe we can make a difference." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "The Cubs sent a message, through the Cathara diplomatic channels. They wanted to thank us." "What did they say?" "That they're not afraid of the dark anymore, because they know that somewhere out there the starfighters are watching." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Starfighters, she liked that. It spoke to humanity's role in the galaxy, not as conquerors or rulers, but as guardians of the light against the darkness. As she walked back to her quarters to prepare for the mission ahead, Sarah thought about all the other Cubs out there. Cathara and Velter and species she'd never heard of, all of them vulnerable, all of them depending on someone to stand between them and the predators. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity took that responsibility very seriously indeed. The outer rim system of Hadera III looked like hell itself had opened up and spilled across the stars. From the command bridge of the Guardian Asterisk, Captain Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with growing horror as the scope of the Bloodfang operation became clear. This wasn't just a raid, it was systematic genocide. "Casualty reports coming in from all 3 colonies," Commander Rodriguez said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Hadera Prime, New Garden, and the mining platform at Titan Falls. Population, roughly 2 million Velter civilians, current survivors." He paused, checking his display. "Approximately 400,000 and falling." Sarah felt sick. The Velter were pacifists, a species of gentle herbivores whose greatest achievement was their agricultural technology. They'd turned barren worlds into garden paradises, feeding dozens of other species through their advanced farming techniques. They had no weapons, no military, no way to defend themselves against the 17 Bloodfang battle cruisers currently reducing their colonies to rubble. "Time to intercept?" Sarah asked. 47 minutes at maximum burn," Lieutenant Patterson replied from the helm. The young pilot had matured considerably since Kepler 442, but his voice still carried the same fierce determination. "The rest of the fleet is spread across 3 systems. We're on our own until they can regroup." 1 ship against 17. The mathematics were even worse than Kepler 442 had been, but the mathematics didn't account for what was happening on those worlds below. The mathematics didn't factor in the screams of children watching their parents die. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's bad." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what had once been a school. The walls were decorated with the simple drawings that children made everywhere in the galaxy, crude pictures of families and flowers and sunshine. Now those walls were scorched with weapon fire, and the tiny desks were overturned in chaos. In the center of it all stood a Bloodfang raider captain, not the same one from Kepler 442, but cut from the same mold. His 4 arms spread wide as he addressed the camera, his razor-sharp teeth gleaming in the firelight. "Greetings, humans," he snarled through the universal translator. "I am Captain Vexhar of the Crimson Fang. You know why we are here. You made us famous, Starfighter Chen. Now you will watch us work." The camera panned across the school's main room, revealing a scene that would haunt Sarah's nightmares for the rest of her life. Hundreds of Velter cubs huddled together in terror while raiders herded them into containment fields. The young aliens looked like flowers, bipedal, with petals for hair and skin that shifted color with their emotions. Right now, they were all showing the deep purple of absolute terror. "1 ship," Captain Vexhar continued, his voice dripping with mock sympathy. One ship against our entire fleet. How many can you save, Starfighter? How many cubs will die while you choose which battle to fight first? The transmission cut to show aerial views of the 3 colonies. Each was under assault by multiple raider ships, their defenseless populations being systematically rounded up. The Velter had no concept of violence. Their language didn't even have words for weapons or warfare. Choose quickly, Vexhar's voice echoed across the bridge. Every minute you hesitate, another 1,000 die. Show us this famous human mercy. Show us how it feels to watch the innocent burn. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities and probabilities. 3 colonies, millions of lives at stake, and only minutes to decide who lived and who died. Captain, Rodriguez said quietly, whatever you're thinking, I'm with you. We all are. Sarah looked around at her crew, human faces mixed with a few aliens who joined the Humanitarian Response Division. All of them waiting for her to perform another miracle, to somehow find a way to save everyone. Patterson, set course for the mining platform at Titan Falls, she ordered. Sir, Patterson's voice reflected the confusion she could see in everyone's faces. That's the smallest population center, if we're going to save the most lives. The most lives are at Hadera Prime, yes, Sarah interrupted. Which is exactly what they want us to think. Chief Williams, call up the tactical assessment of Titan Falls. What makes that mining platform special? Williams activated his console, data flowing across the screen. Remote location, minimal civilian population, heavy industrial equipment. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. The antimatter refinery. Holy hell, Captain. They're not just raiding, they're trying to get their hands on military-grade antimatter. Sarah nodded grimly. Enough antimatter to power their entire fleet for years, or to turn every major population center in human space into a crater. This whole operation isn't about slaves or resources. It's about acquiring the means to hit us where we live. The tactical picture suddenly became much clearer and much more terrifying. The attacks on the other colonies were diversions, designed to split human attention while the real prize was seized from under their noses. With that much antimatter, the Bloodfang raiders could threaten entire star systems. New plan, Sarah announced. We're going to stop them from getting the antimatter, but we're also going to save everyone, all of them. Rodriguez frowned. Sarah, I don't see how. The Velter homeworld, Sarah interrupted. They have bioships too, don't they? Living vessels like the Cathara. Yes, but they're not warships. They're agricultural vessels, seed ships designed to spread plant life to new worlds. They have no weapons, no shields. Sarah smiled, and there was something predatory in the expression. They don't need weapons. They just need to be fast enough to run and big enough to carry refugees. Chief, how long would it take to evacuate 2 million civilians using Velter bioships? Williams ran quick calculations on his console. If they had enough ships, maybe 6 hours for a complete evacuation. But Captain, the raiders aren't going to just sit there and watch us load refugees. They will if they're busy dealing with us. Here's what we're going to do. What followed was the most complex operation Sarah had ever planned. Using the Guardian's bioorganic communication systems, she reached out to every Velter ship in the system. Cargo haulers, agricultural vessels, even pleasure craft. Most were hiding in the outer asteroid belt, their crews paralyzed with terror. This is Captain Chen of the human vessel Guardian *, she broadcast on all frequencies. We know you're scared. We know you don't understand why this is happening to your people. But right now, millions of Velter are depending on us to save them. I need every ship you have to help with evacuation. The response was immediate but heartbreaking. The Velter didn't understand concepts like military strategy or tactical planning. All they knew was that their children were dying and they felt helpless to stop it. Starfighter, came one response in the gentle, musical tones of Velter speech. We are not warriors. We cannot fight the Deathbringers. Our ships carry seeds and soil, not weapons. I'm not asking you to fight, Sarah replied gently. I'm asking you to do what Velter do best, nurture life. Help us save the cubs. Help us get them away from the Deathbringers. One by one, the bioships began emerging from hiding. Sarah watched in amazement as nearly 200 vessels of various sizes converged on the 3 colonies. The Velter might not understand warfare, but they understood family. When children were threatened, Even civilian Velter would risk everything to help. Guardian to all Velter vessels, Sarah broadcast. We're uploading evacuation coordinates to your navigation systems. Hadara Prime and New Garden are your priorities. Load as many civilians as you can carry, then get them to the rally point in the outer system. We'll handle the raiders. Starfighter, came another transmission. What of Titan Falls? The Deathbringers have many ships there. Sarah's expression hardened. Leave Titan Falls to us. We're going to show those Deathbringers what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The next hour was a masterpiece of coordinated chaos. While the Velter bioship swept in to begin massive evacuation operations at 2 of the colonies, the Asterisk Guardian made her approach to Titan Falls. Sarah had every advantage of surprise. The raiders expected her to go for the largest population center first. Instead, she was about to hit them where they were most vulnerable. Tactical assessment, Sarah ordered as they approached the mining platform. 6 raider ships in defensive formation around the facility, Rodriguez reported. They've secured the antimatter storage, but it looks like they're having trouble with the transfer systems. Velter technology doesn't interface well with Bloodfang equipment. Sarah smiled coldly. Then let's make sure they don't get the chance to figure it out. Patterson, take us in fast and hard. I want to be on top of them before they know we're here. The Asterisk Guardian dropped out of hyperspace less than 1,000 kilometers from Titan Falls, her bioorganic hull shimmering with defensive patterns. The raiders barely had time to register her presence before the human ship opened fire with everything she had. But the Guardian wasn't just a warship. She was a fusion of human and Cathara technology, and the Cathara had learned a few things about defensive warfare during their long history of avoiding predators. Instead of relying purely on shields and armor, the bioship could actually reshape parts of her hull, creating sacrificial sections that could be jettisoned if damaged. The battle was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. The Asterisk Guardian fought like a living thing, her hull flowing and changing as she absorbed and redirected enemy fire. When the raiders tried to concentrate their attacks on her weapon systems, the ship simply grew new gun turrets from her organic structure. Hull integrity at 94%, Rodriguez reported in amazement. The bioarmor is actually adapting to their weapon frequencies. It's learning how to resist them. Sarah nodded, but her attention was focused on the tactical display. The 6 raider ships were good, but they were fighting according to conventional tactics against an opponent that didn't follow conventional rules. Target their engines, Sarah ordered. We don't want to destroy them, we want to disable them. Once they can't run, we can deal with them at our leisure. The Asterisk Guardian's asterisk weapons reached out with surgical precision, her bioorganic targeting systems guided by the kind of instinctive awareness that only living things possessed. One by one, the raider ships found their propulsion systems crippled, leaving them drifting helplessly around the mining platform. Captain, the communications officer called out, we're receiving surrender terms from the raider flagship. Put them through, Sarah replied. Captain Vexar's face appeared on the screen, but his earlier arrogance had been replaced by something approaching respect. Starfighter Chen, your reputation for impossible victories is well earned, but you cannot save them all. While you waste time with us, my forces at the other colonies are harvesting your precious Velter. Sarah smiled, and this time the expression was genuinely warm. Why don't you check your tactical display, Captain? See how well your harvesting is going. She watched Vexar's expression change as he accessed his ship's sensors. The readings would show him exactly what Sarah had been monitoring throughout the battle, the massive evacuation operation now underway at both remaining colonies. Impossible, Vexar snarled. The Velter have no military vessels. They cannot mount an evacuation of this scale. You're right, Sarah agreed. They have something better than military vessels. They have a community that cares about each other, something you wouldn't understand. On the tactical display, Sarah could see the beautiful choreography of the evacuation. Hundreds of bioships moving in perfect coordination, their organic hulls pulsing with gentle light as they loaded terrified civilians. The Bloodfang ships at the colonies were trying to intercept them, but the Velter vessels were fast and maneuverable, designed for quick planetary approaches. Captain, Rodriguez whispered, the evacuation numbers are incredible. They've already moved nearly 500,000 civilians to safety. Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the victory in battle. This was what the Humanitarian Response Division was really about, not just defeating the bad guys, but mobilizing entire communities to protect each other. Vexhar, she said, turning back to the raider captain, here's what's going to happen. You're going to recall your forces from the colonies, all of them. In return, I won't blow your ships apart and leave you drifting in space. The alien's four arms gestured in what Sarah had learned was Bloodfang's sign for extreme agitation. You cannot dictate terms to us, human. We outnumber your forces 10-1 across this system. Actually, Sarah replied cheerfully, you might want to check your sensors again. Long-range scan, outer system approach vectors. She watched with satisfaction as Vexhar's expression shifted from anger to shock to something approaching panic. The long-range sensors would be showing him the approach signatures of the rest of the Humanitarian Response Division. 11 more ships dropping out of hyperspace and accelerating toward the system. I told you we were just one ship, Sarah said. I never said we were alone. The final battle was anticlimactic. Faced with overwhelming odds and no chance of achieving their objectives, the Bloodfang Raiders chose discretion over valor. They abandoned their operations and fled the system, leaving behind only wreckage and the bitter knowledge that their grand plan had been completely defeated. But the real victory wasn't in the Raiders' defeat. It was in watching the Velter bioships return to their worlds, carrying nearly 2 million survivors back to safety. It was seeing species that had never worked together before cooperating to save lives. It was the message that would spread across the galaxy, that the strong could protect the weak, that communities could come together in times of crisis. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Guardian Asterisk, watching the last of the evacuation ships dock with their home ports. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency, but she could see the pride in their faces. Captain, Rodriguez said, approaching with a communication pad, we're receiving messages from across the sector. The Cathara Assembly is requesting a formal alliance. The Velter Council wants to establish joint defense protocols. And, he smiled, the Galactic Exploration Council wants to schedule a meeting to discuss humanity's expanding humanitarian mission. Sarah laughed, remembering Admiral Morrison's warnings about overextension. I guess we're officially the galaxy's emergency response service now. Could be worse, Chief Williams commented from his position near the tactical console. Could be sitting behind a desk somewhere filing reports. Through the main view screen, Sarah could see Velter children playing on the surface of their restored worlds. Small figures that looked like dancing flowers, their colorful patterns bright with joy and safety. Somewhere among them were the cubs they'd saved, growing up in a galaxy where someone had shown them that the darkness could be pushed back. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a priority message from Fleet Command. They want a full mission report and recommendations for expanding the Humanitarian Response Division. Sarah nodded, but her attention was still on the children below. Each one represented a future, a possibility, a chance for something better than the predatory chaos that too often ruled the galaxy. Tell Fleet Command we'll need more ships, she said quietly. A lot more ships because this is just the beginning. As the Guardian prepared to depart for her next mission, Sarah thought about a small Cathara cub she'd met months ago, one who had asked why humans would risk everything for children who weren't their own species. She thought about the answer she'd given then, that someone had to stand up for the cubs, no matter whose cubs they were. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species struggling to survive and protect their young. There would always be predators, always be those who preyed on the weak and defenseless, but there would also always be someone standing against them. The starfighters were watching, the starfighters were ready. And the children of the galaxy could sleep safely, knowing that somewhere among the stars, humanity stood guard against the dark.